Hello, Dr. Kindred, fellow classmates, and any others interested in hearing about my academic service learning project with Growing Hope. My name is Anthony Snyder, and I'm a graduating senior at Eastern Michigan University. Over the past couple of months, I've been working with a wonderful nonprofit organization called Growing Hope. In this brief presentation, I will talk about my experiences with the project. I will first talk about the agency that I worked with. I will talk about the organization's needs. I will explain from start to finish what I did to help the organization. I will speak on the final outcome of the project. And finally, I will touch on what I would do differently in hindsight, as well as what was successful and went well with my project. So, without any further ado, I will tell you a little bit about Growing Hope. I acquired the information through the Growing Hope webpage and through personal experience. Growing Hope is an organization that is determined to help people improve their lives and communities through gardening and healthy food access. They are an organization that fosters learning, improves nutrition, encourages self-reliance, and promotes positive community futures. Growing Hope is involved with a very diverse background of people from all different walks of life. Their approach isn't to serve people, but to partner with and resource for people. Growing Hope intends to reach out to parts of the community that are struggling the most, and that are typically unable to provide healthy food for themselves. Growing Hope has a farmers market in Ypsilanti, Michigan that is available to all members of the community. This market attracts individuals from all socioeconomic backgrounds. In 2009, 20% of the sales from the farmers market were to low-income customers using food stamps and related low-income assistance programs. Growing Hope originally started as a neighborhood gardening site in 1999. Growing Hope became a recognized 501c3 nonprofit organization in 2003, and ever since has been encouraging and supporting their local community in regards to growing and eating healthy food. Growing Hope has 4 values that they try to adhere to in every facet of their organization. Those values are strong community partnerships, investing in young people, believing in people's ability to be self-reliant, and hope and optimism. Growing Hope provides training, resources, and advocacy to build strong and vital communities. Growing Hope offers many opportunities for one to get involved and volunteer. People can get involved with the organization through monetary donations, sponsorships, and hands-on volunteering. Some hands-on volunteering that Growing Hope offers are farm volunteers, snow removal volunteers, maintenance volunteers, graphic design volunteers, garden leadership training assistants, seed planting volunteers, and the most prominent volunteering opportunity is the Urban Farm Internship Program. With such a wide variety of opportunities, one could easily find a volunteer opportunity unique to their own strengths and experiences. Now that you know a little bit about the organization that I serve, I will explain to you some of the immediate needs of Growing Hope and why I structured the project in the way that I did. Upon first speaking to Jared Talaga, my agency representative from Growing Hope, it was evident that their Urban Farm Internship Program was the one that needed the most assistance. Jared reported that in the program there was a high level of turnover, a high level of absenteeism, a lack of consistency and congruency, and a lack of overall accountability. The Urban Farm Internship Program is vital to the success of the organization. With so many issues surrounding the program, it was easy to see that this was the program that I should work to help. After putting out the idea of working on a manual for the program as well as an accountability contract, Jared was immediately on board with revamping this program. We believe that the level of turnover and absenteeism was rooted in the fact that the interns may not have felt like they were a part of the organization. We concluded that this could be fixed by offering monthly check-in sessions as well as weekly educational sessions. The weekly educational sessions could help with this issue by providing a forum for the interns and full-time workers to discuss topics pertaining to the industry. We also believe that consistency and congruency could be fixed by having a set, universal manual for all interns. With a universal manual for the position, the interns are all on the same page. The next issue that we really hoped to resolve was the lack of accountability in regards to the interns in this program. Jared really liked the contract that I gave him, and I signed before I started working with Growing Hope. He wanted the same accountability of his interns that I had with the organization. We then decided to add an accountability contract to the internship program. Having all responsibilities laid out in front of the intern and the agency representative and having both parties sign seemed like the best way to address the issue. I believe that the accountability contract would also help with the congruency issue that I stated previously. Having both parties sign the contract facilitates congruency between the organization's expectation of the intern. After now knowing some of the pressing organizational concerns, I will now break down from start to finish what exactly I did to complete this project. The first thing I needed to do was choose an organization to work with. I knew right off the bat that I really wanted to work with an organization that directly impacts the local Ypsilanti community, since I've lived in Ypsilanti for about 5 years now. I met with Dr. Kindred and we talked about some organizations that would be a good fit for my interests and my skill set. There are a few organizations that operate in Ypsilanti, but Growing Hope immediately grabbed my attention. An organization whose mission is to grow healthy food, help others grow healthy food, and educate the community on the benefits of healthy food sounded right up my alley. I called Growing Hope to talk to a representative and was connected with Jared Talaga, my eventual agency representative. I then explained to him the nature of the project and asked if indirect service was something that they would be interested in. Jared had agreed to work with me, and we had agreed on a time later in the week to discuss some potential projects over the phone. I again met with Dr. Kindred to gain further information on the project, and she helped me come up with a few great ideas for projects that I could talk to Jared about and see if there was a need. When I spoke to Jared, I threw out a couple of ideas that Dr. Kindred and I came up with. Jared immediately loved the idea of me putting together a manual for Growing Hope. We met later that week to discuss in detail a brief overview of what they needed. They were in great need of Urban Farm Internship Manual. Jared and I spoke again the following day. I told him that I needed to develop a contract between Growing Hope and myself, so after discussing some details, he asked me to write up a rough contract draft and come meet him at the agency the following day. When we met, we discussed and finalized the components of the contract agreement. After saying he would be there all day, I decided to finish the contract that day and bring the final copy to him that evening so he could sign it. That is exactly what I did. After he signed, we came up with a time to meet weekly. The next time Jared and I met, it was basically a forum in which I asked him many questions about the organization, the farming process, and the industry that they serve. He told me that the manual would help with the organization's high intern turnover and would help with some of the interns' lack of consistency, accountability, and congruency. We then talked in depth about how my project could help the organization. We believed that a complete intern manual and an accountability contract would help make workers feel like they were more a part of the organization, which would help facilitate congruency and accountability. With all the manuals being the same, it would really help with consistency. I went home and then realized I didn't really know a whole lot about the farming process and the industry that they serve. Luckily, I had a helpful research assignment due rather soon, the agency landscape report. So I did a healthy amount of research to not only complete the paper, but to help in the development of my project. Jared and I had another meeting. This one focused around the resources that I could use on the project. We also had a quick question and answer session about the things that I had read about the industry. Jared gave me a fair amount of resources and information to use on my project. I then made sure I did a good amount of research on the writing and formatting of manuals. I really didn't know how to format manuals and to give them that inviting feel. So I believe that the research I did during this time helped all of my project components be a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. This next time when I arrived to Growing Hope for my agency meeting, there were 2 other members of the organization there, including Jared. They were there to help me brainstorm potential components of the manual. We eventually agreed on the components. It was really great to see that the organization was invested in my project. Having that input from them really helped my project become exactly what they wanted, which is exactly what I wanted. I really felt like a member of the organization that day when we discussed all the components in detail. After this very successful meeting, I decided to research the components and subcomponents of a good internship manual to make my manual as complete as possible. When I met with Jared for our next meeting, we discussed the structure of the manual. He said that he wanted it to be 4 to 6 pages, and we agreed upon it having a cover page, industry info, components, timelines, responsibilities, and contact information. Throughout the rest of the week, I spent a great deal of time putting drafts together. I put together a draft for the industry info, so who they are, what they do, needs of the organization. I then drafted up the component section of the manual, which basically highlights the duties of the intern and the relationship to the organization. Then, with the help of Jared's resources, I put together a draft of what a typical week at Growing Hope would look like. I also included a timeline of when they would have internship openings. Jared and I met again to discuss the drafts that I had put together, and we went over some potential changes. We also talked about the accountability contract and went over some of its potential components. I then worked on collecting and formatting pictures, as well as finalizing the manual. I had to search far and wide for pictures to put in the manual, the accountability contract, and the flyer. Then, when I found the pictures, I had to format them in specific ways to make them fit in the manual. This process took a lot longer than I expected, but I believe that it came out very well. After all the pictures, logos, headings, text boxes, and bolded points were formatted, I was finally able to put all of my edited drafts together and format everything into a complete manual. Jared and I met once again to finalize what components and structures should be used in the accountability contract. He looked over my manual and suggested some edits. We also talked about me putting together a flyer for the organization. I finished all of the final edits of the manual first and made changes according to Jared's feedback. Then I put the accountability contract together as a final product. Next, I finalized the flyer to showcase the openings of internship positions at Growing Hope. And then I emailed everything to Jared. After emailing everything to him, we had one last meeting where I showcased everything I had been working on the past couple of months. So now, after having an in-depth, step-by-step understanding of the process I took to complete the project, I will talk about its final outcome. The three final pieces that I ended up with was the completed Urban Farm Internship Program Manual, the accountability contract, and the flyer. The Urban Farm Internship Program Manual is a comprehensive manual consisting of who the organization is, information about the farm, what the organization is looking for in their interns, the duties of the intern, an example of a week schedule, estimated internship timelines, items interns will need to bring, items that Growing Hope will provide, and a short accountability section, including contact information. I believe that the manual entertains all of the desires that Growing Hope had for it. The accountability contract consists of contact information of the agency, a short description of the work that the agency does, the responsibilities of the intern, and most importantly, a place for the agency representative and intern to sign in agreement to the terms of the contract. And finally, the flyer was something that we had agreed upon me doing towards the end of the process. It's a tear-off flyer with contact information that highlights internship openings for the Urban Farm program. We agreed that with compliance of Eastern Michigan University, we could post this flyer on university billboards so that students would be aware of the need of the program and that it exists. After explaining the final product, I will now speak on some of the things that in hindsight I would have done differently. Though I believe that the project was an overall success, it is always good to analyze everything after a big project and come up with ways to minimize issues for future projects. After looking at everything, there are three main things that I would have done a little bit differently. The first that I believe I could have done a little bit better is if I would have talked to my agency representative in greater detail before we came up with the timeline for the project. We had a general idea of what needed to be done, as well as the need of the organization. But if we had went into greater detail initially, we could have abided by the timeline a little bit better. Luckily, we set the project end date 2 weeks before it needed to be completed, just in case we ran into any issues or things that took longer than expected. But, nevertheless, if we had 1 or 2 lengthy meetings ahead of time to set the exact components of the material, things could have gone a little bit better out of the gate. Secondly, I believe that I should have kept up with the Bright Impact hours as the project was going on. Though I kept very detailed notes on the dates, hours, and things that I had completed, Going into Bright Impact throughout the process would have spread out the work of logging hours throughout a couple of months rather than all at once. Finally, I wish I would have tested the submittal process of documents in Decilio. I did not realize that the formatting of documents would change when being attached into Works. I now have to go back to my original documents and try to make some formatting changes so they're able to be read, so that none of the text boxes, pictures, and other information is cut off. After mentioning a few of the things that I would do differently, I will now talk about some of the things that I believe went very well and are the main reasons I am proud to say I worked on this project with an organization as great as Growing Hope. I believe that there were a lot of things that went well throughout the duration of this project. The first and most important thing that I believe went well was the hands-on approach that the organization had with me and my project. The weekly agency meetings were really helpful in staying on the same page with the agency. We would start off discussing the things that I had worked on the previous week, talk about what was on the plate for the next week, and then talk about how it tied into the whole project. Growing Hope was a welcoming agency to work with, and I'm happy that I had the opportunity to work with them. Secondly, I think that the overall end product ended up being something that I'm really proud of. Even though I was new to formatting manuals, I believe that it is everything I could have expected it to be, and everything the organization wanted it to be. This leads me to the final thing that I believe went really well. I believe that the organization's needs were met. This, above all, is most important to me. I came into Growing Hope telling them that I could accomplish something for them, and through speaking with my agency representative, I think that they were very happy with what I produced for them. So, in conclusion, I believe that I was very fortunate to work with such a great organization and great people throughout the semester, whether it be Dr. Kindred, Jared, classmates in threaded discussions, or all the helpful people at Growing Hope. I'm proud to say that I made an impact in the local Ypsilanti community. The Academic Service Learning Project is something that I believe is very important to graduating seniors taking communication capstone. It helped me get out of my EMU bubble